We came to this neighborhood in New York City, the meatpacking district as it's now known, and friends in Italy will probably know the neighborhood well now because it is the fanciest neighborhood and most exciting neighborhood in New York City. But when we came here, there were just the animals of New York City, and this was the neighborhood where they brought beef in and they cut the beef. So my name is Thomas Rossant, and I'm a design partner at Ennead Architects here in New York City. We have about 175 people here in New York City, and we have about 20 in Shanghai, China. So we came here, like all architects, because it was cheap. And we moved in onto the 8th floor, then we've now moved down here to the lower spaces, and then we opened our office in China 5 years ago. Today, the meatpacking district is one of the most expensive places to be. And Ennead is, you know, in English you can say monad, dyad, triad, and so the Greeks and the Latins, you can keep on going, there's always a number. The leadership of the projects stays here in New York and then travels to Shanghai as needed. And all partners are involved in doing work in Asia, and none of us specialize in a typology. So whenever there's a new type of project in China that is necessary and one of us has a special affinity for that type of project, we will go to China and do it. But we have about, as I said, 20 people there full time, but the leadership of the partnership goes there occasionally, once a month, twice a month to work in China.
Hello and welcome to our 8th floor studio at Ennead Architects. My name is Don Weinreich. I'm a partner here at the firm. I've been with the firm for over 30 years, and I actually started here at an extremely junior level. I was sweeping the floors and making the coffee, and I'm still here doing some really interesting projects. So what has kept me at the firm all these many years is it's really several things. One is it's the culture of the place, it's the quality of the people who choose to work here and the relationships and bonds that we form. Because we don't divide the office into typological studios, we actually are generalists, and we believe that smart people who are willing to apply themselves to challenging problems, as they move from project type to project type, they will pollinate one project with the ideas that they bring from another, and it makes a very rich kind of atmosphere for design. So over the years I've worked on museums, hospitals, laboratories, even working in the arena of refugee settlements, which I can talk about a little bit more in a moment. But the diversity of the practice has really been important to me, and the fact that underpinning everything we do here is a belief that architecture can produce good in the world. We have really a social agenda through architecture as our vector. So that can be applied in cities, it can be applied in wildernesses, it really doesn't matter, but architecture does have that responsibility to humanity, so we consider ourselves to be humanists.
What's so great about it is how much invention we can bring to new architecture. So one day I will work with certain people over here, tomorrow with certain people over there. Today I might work with 2 other partners. In a year time, I'll work with 3 other different partners. And what we each bring is ideas from new projects to the next project, but the same with our staff as well. So there's always new ideas coming together. The design ideas are exchanged very rapidly, and that rapid exchange, we think, makes better buildings. But part of that is also listening to younger people. We have a saying here in America, which is to don't ask for permission, but beg for forgiveness later. So that's true with everybody who works here. If you have a great idea, not just a great idea for a building or a particular aspect of a building, but how to change the firm culture, how to change our office space, go ahead and start doing it. The most important thing about our process is we believe, like all architects do, in beauty and making architecture that inspires people. But well beyond that, since we work mostly with institutions, we believe in the power of architecture to change things. So the very first thing we do is ask questions. What do we want to change about a city? What do we want to change about a neighborhood? What do we want to change about a community or an institution? We believe that the term social engineering is a good term. And we believe that architecture can bring about outcomes in how people interact, how people socialize, how people feel. So the very first thing we do before we draw anything is to think about what is the outcome that the architecture must generate in people. And then we decide, once we have those things, how to make an architecture that brings it about. Always start with hand sketching, always start with models, and always start from our sustainability of what are the most passive elements in sustainability that we must adopt in the project to make it a high performance project. And then only then do we go to the computer. And we start usually in Rhino, but we use all sorts of parametric modeling. And we have a very, very robust applied computing department. You know the James Bond movies where there's Q, who has the exploding pen, and before James Bond goes off on his mission, he goes to Q and says, "What do you have for me?" Before we start a project, we go upstairs to applied computing and we say, "I have a new museum. What do you have for me?" And those guys up there say, "Here's a new program we just wrote. Here's a new way to model, we just did it." And so that's one of the things we do in our computers that make our designs so interesting. So first I want to say we're living in the most exciting design century ever. Forget about the Renaissance and Da Vinci. Forget about everything that came. Because first time ever, there is architecture, digital technology, and humanism together. And so in this century, the architect will finally be called on to solve many more of our planet and our society's problems, right? It's not just making things that look cool, but actually that change the world. And what we're finding right now is we're not scared of that digital technology at all. And we're finding that manufacturers are keeping step with us. But yes, on almost every project, we come to a place where we want to go, can't go, but we don't stop. We find a manufacturer and say, let's do this together, right? Either by creating our own software, linking to other software, direct to fabrication, off-site construction, rapid prototyping, 3D printing. Manufacturers we like right now are very willing to partner with a firm of our size and our capabilities to try new things. And we're doing that on all of our projects. How do we want to make architecture that is a change agent on a community? So we have to take a deep dive into how to improve human cultures, right? And then ask what architecture delivers that improvement. So the process is the same, whether it's 10,000 square feet or 10 million square feet. We've done almost every type of building, from a wastewater treatment plant to a presidential library, everything in between.
We often get asked in interviews, how do you deliver a project? Do you come in and do things by WebEx? Do you do it by person? Do you do it this way, et cetera? And how do you craft a process with a client? And in each case, it is unique because of the circumstances of the institution, how they might want to transform themselves, where they're not willing to transform themselves. And so we have to work with them to understand where their capacity is for change. And we really firmly believe that architecture can enable that and can help promote that, but we can only do so much. Our architecture can help change an institution or a culture, but only if that institution is willing to accept that change. When we bring it back to the office and we identify the right people to then deliver that project, we have to identify both the technical skills but also the personalities, because ultimately we need to be able to find a way to engage with the client such that they respond to the conversation and they really see it as a journey and a process and not simply they're buying a product off the shelf.
80% of our clients are not-for-profit institutions. They're not interested in making money. They're interested in doing good in the world. These are the best clients to have. Our 20% for-profit clients also understand the power of design, right? We just don't work for anybody. We work for private developers who understand that making cities that are based on humanism, that making cities that are based and developments that are based on making communities that are socially coherent, right? So we like our clients, but also we are fanatical about making. So for us, a picture is not architecture. Architecture is architecture. So we love bringing projects all the way through completion and also studying them after completion, because we learn so much from our projects by going back 5 years later and measuring things, learning from them to make us better as we make new ones. But also right now, which is very interesting, and I think it's important for all architects to consider this, is we have to expand as a profession, not contract. So we're also moving in the other direction to advise clients and do strategic thinking for clients well before they even need architecture. So now, in terms of our client relations, we want to be with them years before they've decided to make a building, 2 years after the building is made.
One of my favorite projects from 10 years ago was a project where we walked in and the client said, okay, we only have this much money. We bought this building. We need to make it transformational. Can you do it? And the numbers didn't really present themselves as an obvious solution of how we would be able to transform the institution. But during the programming and concept design phase, and we kicked around, well, you could do this, or you could do this, we landed on a very simple, straightforward approach, which, because it symbolized the core essence of the institution, was utterly transformational and yet didn't cost that much money at the end of the day. And it really, we would have never predicted that that's how we could have ended up at the project. Certainly didn't know that when we interviewed. But the process by which we uncovered that with the client delivered an exceptional project.
You can't tell an Ennead building, but there's a reason why. It's because we are so committed to our client's vision, not our own ego, that the buildings we make are of the place and time and institution that we're working for. So you can look at a building and say, that's a great building for Stanford University. You can look at Bill Clinton's presidential library and say, that's a great building for Bill Clinton, right? They're of the place, of the client. Stylistically, we're all over the place, but we think that's a good thing because we make architecture that fits the institution, the client, the landscape, the environment.
Ennead Lab was created to ask and answer big questions. That's the heart of it. It really builds upon a practice based here in New York that has always been civic-minded. It's a practice that has always felt that architecture, more than any of the arts, has a social responsibility. And Ennead Lab is sort of the tip of the sword for our firm, in which we can proactively pursue ideas, questions, impacts that are not necessarily going to be made through the straightforward RFQ process. It allows the architect, the designer, to take a more strategic and leadership role, pushing big questions and big issues forward into a public sphere. That, in a nutshell, is what Ennead Lab does.
The lab is very exciting for us because what we do to our staff is say, after 3 or 4 years of working on a building, do you want some time off? Do you have a proposal? We will fund it. And people can work for 2 or 3 months on a project like Bird Safe Glass or a resilient city. And that's our primary research. We also work with other collaborators outside the office who come to us and say, will you partner with us to research something? And again, I think it's one of the most important things that architects can do is now do research, even though they don't have a commission, to say to the world, look, the world needs this, now let's go make it. And that's what the lab is there for. We were part of a consortium that did original research to stop killing birds because birds can't see glass. And working with Audubon Society and other academics, we helped determine a way to make a film on the glass that the birds can see, and then they avoid flying into it. That's only one of the projects in the lab.
So one project that I've been working on that's a very unconventional project for about the last 6 years is working with various institutions, including universities and the United Nations, on developing a more sensible way to use design to help in the resettlement of refugees. So we've come up with a new methodology that promotes the notion that refugees really need to be integrated with their host communities. And in order to place them in the right locations where they will thrive, you need to align the needs and the resources of the refugees with the needs and the resources of the hosts. And this concept has actually proven to be a bit of a game changer and has gained some traction within the UN, and we produced a handbook. This planning and design toolkit for rethinking refugee communities. And this is really meant to be both a polemic and a practical guide for people who are engaged in this field. And what it does is provide tools for planners to work at various scales and in various time frames, from long-range planning far in advance of an emergency to the real-time operation of a refugee settlement.
I am Ryan Lewandowski. I've been a part of Ennead for close to 10 years, with a brief hiatus at one point to go back to grad school. I've been a part of several Ennead lab projects on the side, primarily dealing with geometric explorations and advanced fabrication techniques. One of the earlier, I guess, kind of explorations that's really kind of spun off into an official geometry club that we've created within the office was a 3D printing pasta competition. They had developed themselves a 3D printer that could print pasta dough, and they were calling out for ideas for new pasta shapes and new possibilities with pasta. The other thing that was kind of interesting about this geometry is that it's also scalable, and we're, as architects, always thinking about how different ideas can scale up and down. And we saw this beginning as a bite-sized pasta, but then, how could this become a building itself? I'm always looking for new ways to experience the designs or really test the designs that we're working on every day. Most firms today rely on 3D rendering of a 2D image, and that kind of imagery is very distorted often, and it gives you kind of a lack of sense of scale. I had my first experience of actually being able to put on the Htc Vive headset. And as I was explaining, this is a little bit more sophisticated than the typical mobile device-based VR, and that it tracks your movement, not only looking around, but also up and down. And if you move in the space back and forth, it tracks that movement as well. So it really puts you in the space, which allows me to work within multiple 3D modeling platforms and instantly kind of export my model into a VR environment that I can jump into and really experience the design as I'm working on it.
My name is Stephen Chu. I'm a principal designer here at Ennead Architects. I've been here for about 22 years, most of my career. And one of the reasons I love working here the most is the variety of projects that we have the opportunity to work on, and the spirit of collaboration that we have amongst each other and with the staff. One of the projects that I'm currently working on is the Peabody S6 Museum. This project is interesting because the institution started in 1799, one of the oldest museums, and not only does it hold one of the largest Asian art collections, but it actually is made up of 22 historic buildings. So the addition that we're doing would be the most modern building to add to their collection. One unique thing about the design of this project is that it focuses on the experiential quality of the museum experience, more than just the display of art within the architecture itself.
So at Arizona State University, it's a law school. And what the dean wanted to do there is invent a new type of law school. Law schools traditionally are part of the academy, the university. They're very closed, they're very serious. And in America, to change American society, this dean felt that the law school had to connect to the urban realm, which no law school's ever done that. So we made at Arizona State University the most democratically permeable law school building and put it in the heart of Phoenix, Arizona. This is in the moment of these terrible shootings in America, right, where everyone's concerned with security. This dean and our architecture had the courage, the optimism to say to the Americans in Phoenix and Arizona, come understand the law. The law is important to you as a citizen, not just for someone who's going to be a lawyer. And now it's a completely different type of learning environment where the community, the law professors, and the law students all come together to grapple with the biggest issues facing our society and our legal system.
I'm Kate Mann. I'm associate principal here at Ennead. Been here for more than 20 years, and this is a very special project to us that we've worked on for more than a decade at Vassar College. It's about 2 hours north of New York City, up the Hudson River Valley, and it's for the sciences. It's the integrated sciences at Vassar, and this is the bridge building for laboratory sciences. And what's really interesting about this project in particular is it brings together many different science departments. So we worked with 8 different departments over a span of 10 years just to program the project, and what the result was to renovate a series of historic buildings, but then build a new wet lab building that actually spans over this creek ravine here and connects these two sides of campus. Previously, everyone had to walk down and then back up. It was a big obstacle to campus movement from one side to the other. And what it does also is really create now a focus on what was sort of previously the edge of campus, now is this beautiful wetland corridor. And for the scientists who work here, this is very dear space to them. They study the ecology of the corridor here, so they do research experiments with students in the wetland, and this building really focuses their attention on that wetland. We also innovated a series of bird-friendly design features here, knowing that the wetland was a habitat to bird species, so we won some different lead pilot credit points for developing bird-friendly glass. We used two different techniques, one on either side of the building, as a way to experiment and see what works best and give the students a way to sort of interact with the building and the technologies.
This is our second planetarium. We did the planetarium here in New York City, which a lot of people know as one of the icons of New York, which is the glass box with the sphere inside. That's led by my partner, Tom Wong, and Kevin McClurkin. Shanghai Planetarium is what we call a didactic building. So it's not just by going in and seeing the exhibits that you learn, the building itself explains the cosmos. Like the building itself explains how the cosmos is organized. So when that opens, I think it'll be a very exciting moment for the people of China. And what's so exciting about China right now is they're really starting, having built their infrastructure, built their housing, built the middle class, they're now saying, where are our cultural institutions? And China's building a lot of cultural institutions, and we're really delighted to be part of that.
This is a perfect example of the process that we go through as we design. It's a continual investigation, but really this was a part of our competition phase where we explored many concepts. And this was really not to choose a concept, not choose a scheme, but to integrate these all into a kind of new idea. So we took these 5 ideas, we developed them to a point, we presented them to the client, but then we took all of that and we really turned it into a brand new idea. Many of the concepts that we had started with were integrated into this completely singular and new concept. That's kind of the process that we go through, this exploration, this investigation, to really make sure that we're hitting the root and the most potential out of all of these projects.
Kansas State University is a design school, and there's a funny anecdote about that. It's both enjoyable to have 10 architects as your client, but of course, everyone was very opinionated about the design there. But there too, it was about outcome-based architecture. The goal of that dean was to bring faculty research, because all architecture faculty do their own individual research, the studio research that the students were doing, and commingle them. So there was formal learning in the studio, formal research in the faculty realm, but in the corridor, these two groups mixed and created a whole new type of learning environment. And that has been terribly successful right now. The unique thing here is that everybody has a voice, right? Because it's not It's not me. It's this culture of this office. We're not that type of firm, right? We're a firm that makes great architecture, not because it comes out of one person's head, but because we bring together the very best people, right? And then allow them to work together.